Hello, everyone. Here's Sarah and Gabi again. Welcome back, everyone. Now let's continue talking about trauma. Have you ever wondered why certain patterns keep repeating in your life? No matter how hard you try to change, that there is just something in your life that keeps blocking you at every turn and you can't put your finger on it? Just think about that for a moment. Unresolved trauma stuck in the energy field can be a silent saboteur undermining our efforts to move forward. And today we will shine a light on these hidden saboteurs and learn how to address them head on. And if you haven't yet, we highly encourage you to listen to the last 2 live talks we have done here in the group. And the repercussions of unresolved trauma on adults can be severe and enduring. And unresolved trauma acts as a silent saboteur in our life.
So let's actually talk about what if recovery fails, right? And by this, we mean that trauma treatments so far have failed. And most commonly, the fact that a person represses the traumas completely is why it can fail in the first place. You're looking at people that, have done trauma therapy, they've done regular therapy. They've done all kinds of stuff, and it's just not quite working. So many trauma victims, they require time for healing. We all know this, right? But the victims may have, they may have experienced like very significant physical and emotional trauma. And if you think about it, emotional wounds that we all have, they can't really be healed like physical wounds, right? Um, some will heal quickly, others literally take years to develop a scab and finally heal over, and some they just don't heal at all, right? And for the purpose of defining kind of when recovery fails or when it's a long-term effect, it's, if trauma lasts more than a month, then you can start having various scenarios arising, essentially.
Yeah, and the first scenario is the fact that long-term trauma can be a distressing state of being exacerbated by perceived absence of power to change anything. And we simply feel so powerless. And I think we all were on a stage in our life at this stage, and this leads to long-term stress. And let's take feeling stuck in an emotional abusive marriage, just as an example. You feel stuck. Trauma continues to compound with verbal abuse, and ultimately you can end up living in a permanent state of stress, which we all know is not healthy for us. And long-term stress and long-term trauma can physiologically lead to a high blood pressure, heart disease, suppressed immune system, and increased inflammation, sleep disorders, and so much more. And within our relationships, long-term trauma and stress can, for example, lead to a breakdown in communication due to a possible increase in irritability. And we can become withdrawn and show a decrease in empathy, have more frequent arguments revolving around blame and resentment. And long-term trauma and stress can also lead to reduced intimacy in partnerships, physically and emotionally, since the trauma and stress consume all the available energy you have. And we then end up neglecting our relationships and unfortunately isolating ourselves even more. And it can even impact how we parent and model behavior to our children. So our trauma and stress get picked up by kids and become their own stress and trauma. And as you can see, it has a ton of impact in all the aspects of your life. we are literally sabotaging our own relationships and goals in life.
Right. So then the second scenario that can happen if you have unhealed trauma, and you can probably recognize yourselves in one or even all of them to an extent because we all have unhealed trauma. So the second scenario that can happen is that you have, these recurring abrupt recollections of the occurrence, like nightmares or flashbacks or some kind of reverberation. When the scenes from like the traumatic event, they kind of pop up, they repeat, kind of like worst case scenario, like a horror movie, right? And sometimes it's not like a visual that actually happens, it's actually like a smell or a sound or some kind of sensation that appears, but it's just as startling, right? And it can kind of throw us back into that experience of trauma, kind of starting us over with our healing process. And honestly, it can really just happen anytime. We might really just be sitting here eating ice cream happily while watching pedestrians just going by, and then bam, suddenly we notice a tall person just walking by that has some kind of, similar feature to the person that consistently bullies you at work, and it triggers a flashback and like an increase in heart rate, and you start having all these symptoms, and it triggers you right back into the scenario. So for me personally, I would end up having flashbacks about the ambulance ride to the hospital, that I had when in labor with my son, and the desperation that I could not seem to push my son out, or that, the nurses and doctors did not listen to me. That one has and was a big one. And I'm a nurse myself, like I know. And I was able to heal the traumas with all the tools we cover in our Untrauma workshop. And then the third scenario is avoidance, right? And that's one that is huge. I think most of us are probably guilty of that one. And that's really, you just literally avoid anything that might remind you of trauma. Fearful avoidance may become increasingly common. And this can literally be an example, of, and this is like a drastic example, but a person that is refusing to use trains for streetcars, or is not wanting to talk about transportation in general if they were in a car accident that traumatized them, right? And the more we suppress our trauma, the more often it's likely that, the flashbacks or the sensations come back and kind of pop up at really what seems like the worst of times, right? And that's why we really have to face our traumas and clear them out of our system.
Yeah, and the last scenario of unresolved trauma is a serious case of increased jitteriness. So trauma victims are often unable to sleep and flinch at every unknown and unexpected noise or event. And their life-sustaining autonomic nervous system is always on alert. And it is running like a full-speed engine without actually moving anywhere. So just picture your car in park and you are continuously gunning the engine, trying to move. Not good for the car, right? And we are eventually going to wear out some parts of the engine or flood it. And that's how our nervous system is. Everything becomes a danger because we are constantly in the I am not safe state. But eventually we crash, usually with a mental break or a health breakdown. So in general, the limbic system is active the majority of the time if the trauma remains active past 1 month. And the limbic system is responsible for a person's emotions and can be considered the emotional nervous system. So the limbic system, to clarify, is a complex set of brain structures primarily responsible for emotions, behaviors, motivations, and long-term memory. And it regulates various physiological functions, including fight or flight responses, emotional responses to stimuli, and forming memories associated with emotions. And additionally, the limbic system plays a crucial role in reward processing, influencing behaviors related to survival and pleasure, such as eating, drinking, and sexual activities.
All right, thanks for the explanation. So, if the limbic system remains like just constantly active, active, it's actually really a coping mechanism, a coping technique designed to keep us safe in the face of like persistent adversity, right? And it's a feeling of being always in survival mode or on edge. And over time, that actually becomes the new normal for our brain and body, which not good, right? So our nervous system's physical condition of being on high alert at all times can have then a lasting impact on, the way we think, our actions, our relationships, and we end up with possibly some of these things like intrusive thoughts, like persistent worry or negative thinking, or like you jump to negative conclusion first, and we might have a difficult time concentrating and memory problems. And prioritization of stress over our relationships takes place alongside hypervigilance, right? So we literally, for example, we filter every single word that someone has told us during a conversation, and we analyze what we said to see if we could have done better, if we messed up, and so on and so forth. And that actually is exhausting. And another example of a high alert nervous system could be memory problems, right? So, from my personal experience, I was so nervous about failing again in school that when it came to test time, I literally could not recall any information. Like it just wiped out. I couldn't recall it. And I was on constant alert since I had to struggle so much in middle school mostly, where I had just a really hard time. And, no fun. And then the last example we want to provide really is the presence of, just increased conflict. If trauma essentially has you in that grip and you're constantly on high alert, your relationships, they suffer, right? Most likely. And most likely they suffer under increased conflicts. Just because we're on high alert, it automatically puts us as we're more irritable, we're more impulsive, and often even end up resenting our partner and blame them for failing us in one way or another. And then likewise, your partner or friends, they may become frustrated with the behavior that we're presenting, right? So the question then is, what do we do? We like trauma just has us good, right? We're in that grip, we're in constant high alert state. How do we manage? Like, what do we do? And managing trauma, it really just, it's a combination of self-care practices, of therapeutic techniques, supportive interventions, and so on. And we're just going to talk about different ways to kind of manage trauma, and then also give you some concrete techniques and tools at hand that you can actually use on yourself, or you can even teach them to others. Okay.
So, before we jump into this, let's talk about energy work. So when we talk about energy work, we are speaking of the aspect of our body system that most of us can't see. All of us have an energy field around our physical body that is known as the aura. And this has been supported by scientific findings who have measured the energy frequencies output coming from the palms, For example, when setting different intentions, such as love or anger. And we all generate an electromagnetic field. And all living beings, in fact, do so, not only the humans, also animals and plants. And the ideal health state for the aura is centered around the physical body, free of holes, tears, and so on. And within this energy field, trauma can become stuck. And trauma can get stuck in the energy field. And energy therapy works with the principle that first we have something in our energy field, and then it represents itself as a physical mental alignment, such as an anxiety, lower back pain, headaches, and so on.
So why do we care? Right? We care because trauma can create literally a shift in the aura. It can lead to weak spots in the aura. It can lead to areas of the aura to become kind of weak or thin. and they lead us to be more susceptible to, I guess, quote unquote, negative influences, just kind of the vibes going around us, like how people, their moods, that can bring us down easier and so on. And trauma can literally lead to a literal blockage in the flow of energy within the aura in our energy system. And it can disrupt the natural balance and flow of our life force, of our energy, which can often cause tiredness, fatigue, and so much more. And negative emotions from traumatic events can leave a residue in the aura and can lead to feelings of heaviness, sadness, anxiety to persist long after the event. And we're just naming a few effects that trauma can have on the aura, but there are so many more. And we could literally probably hold an entire life just alone on this aspect, right? Energy work is key, and it can truly be missing puzzle piece on the path of healing. And, if we don't clear the trauma out of the energy field, recovery may fail, and we may continue to struggle consistently and persistently, like just over and over to kind of just overcome and heal and release traumas completely. Okay. So that's why we care, and that's why it's so important. So let's actually talk about different ways to manage trauma and the techniques that you can use for yourself.
Okay, so I would say just let's start with a great grounding technique that can also be extremely helpful to utilize if you are experiencing repercussions of trauma and a constantly high alert nervous system. It is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. Here we identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste to stay grounded. So now let's do it together. And feel free to share your responses. All right. Find 5 things you can see around you. Now 4 things you can touch. Great. Now 3 things you can hear. It's a little bit more difficult, right? Awesome. Now 2 things you can smell. And last one thing you can taste. How do you feel now? Hopefully a bit more grounded and safer in your body and your surroundings. So safe place visualization is key when you are managing trauma. It is a great practice to create a safe place in your mind. And this could be a memory, a location, or an imaginary place that provides you with feelings of safety and peace.
So, other techniques you can use are just guided meditation that promote relaxation, mindfulness practice, where you really just simply focus and breathe into the present moment, and also regular physical activity. Walking, yoga, swimming are great ways to get moving. That can also reduce stress and improve mood. Um, if a hardcore like hit workout or something works for you as well, that's great. But a lot of times those intensive workouts can actually raise our cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone response. So if you're working specifically in regards to trauma, I would probably stay with the more gentler versions of like walking, yoga, swimming. There's even trauma-informed yoga practices that you can find online and near you to assist you further.
Yeah, and for some, creative expressions through art therapy and journaling or writing a blog can be extremely therapeutic. And another great way to manage anxiety, trauma, and stress feelings is the use of relaxation techniques. You can use conscious muscle relaxation, where you systematically tense and intentionally release different muscle groups in your body. And something that is extremely important in this whole experience is self-compassion. Talk to yourself gently, soothe yourself, become a partner and team up with yourself instead of working against yourself. And also forgive yourself for having had this traumatic experience, however big or small it was. And giving yourself grace in addition to a balanced diet and good sleep habits can go a long, long way. And I know personally from experience that I constantly ended up talking to myself during the process of resolving my mom's apartment and placing her in a nursing home. And I had to cheer myself on and gently give myself praise. And at night, I would lay down and literally start at my feet, telling each body part, thank you, tensing it and then intentionally relaxing it. And it provided me with much better sleep than I even hoped for.
Yeah, super helpful. So last, we do want to ensure and share and just make sure that you do understand that professional help is also just magical and can be so helpful. Like therapy is a wonderful tool, right? And there are so many therapists that are trauma focused. You know, you have EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And then you have trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. There's so many that are specifically geared towards that. And then, you know, if you're looking for more on the energetic aspect, we have our on trauma workshop. And, you know, sometimes medication may honestly also be needed to manage symptoms until we can then get to a point where we're more on top of it all. And we can kind of work our way through and out of, you know, the hole. Like sometimes we can be in a pretty bad hole where we might be in due to trauma. You know, when you incorporate these techniques and practices, we can kind of just start creating kind of more of a comprehensive approach to managing trauma for really ourselves and then also others, right? So just kind of as a review, I guess, or a summary of today, we kind of just explored the hidden impacts of unresolved trauma and how it can silently sabotage our lives, and it can lead to long-term stress, flashbacks, and avoidance behaviors. And then we also discussed the importance of recognizing, you know, these effects and managing them through self-care practices and professional help. And then finally, we introduced the benefits of energy therapy, you know, grounding techniques and other methods to kind of help mitigate the psychological and emotional burdens of trauma. And then there's actually some more wonderful techniques and ways to assist our nervous system and assist in trauma that we're actually going to cover in our live next week on Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then as well as recommendation for, you know, just an entirely different approach that we have created to trauma that you've probably never heard of. So make sure you join us, okay? And this is just really where we'll kind of take more of a dive and can kind of, you know, we'll highly recommend our on trauma workshop for just tons of unique techniques that can assist you. And then last but not least, again, as a reminder, we're not actually trained mental health professional therapists, right? And if you're experiencing trauma or need professional help, please consult with a qualified healthcare provider or a mental health professional. But again, if you're looking at it from, let me see if energy therapy and clearing trauma out of the energy field is the last puzzle piece, then we're it for you. That's when our on trauma workshop comes in. We also do private sessions with clients to kind of assist you, you know, we can assist you that way as well. So just drop your questions, your comments, your concerns below the live, and then also let us know if you watched live, #live or #replay, okay? So thanks for being here with us today.
See you soon.